Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast, your weekly look inside the world of fly fishing presented by Pete Tigers. If you're enjoying listening, please consider subscribing.
In today's podcast, I talk with Roger Taylor about his life in the Eden Valley, his deep passion for his home river of the same name, and the beautiful wooden nets he makes under the name of Eden Made. We cover plenty of ground as I learn about his home water and the work of an artisan craftsman making a high-quality product for anglers the world over. Roger Taylor, a very warm welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast. How are you today?
Good morning, Pete. Yes, I'm doing really well. Yeah, good. How are you?
Very well indeed, thank you. This has been recorded on the 3rd of April, and yesterday, my home river, the Tor, does take a little bit of time to warm up. And although we might get March browns, we might get lots of other stuff, large darks and stuff like that, generally the fish don't tend to rise to them. And I had one of those dream moments yesterday that I was fishing and a fish just rose in front of me and I cast to it and caught it. And it was one of those lovely moments that you have. And I was thinking perhaps next week might be the time, because obviously we've had these really cold mornings, certainly probably nothing in comparison to what you're having right now. But I sort of hit there in the morning for whatever reason. There was a salmon I've been sort of keeping an eye on, see if I can catch it, and still can't. And then took my trout rod with me as well. So that was a really, to me, it felt like it was a proper getting the season underway. But has your season got underway, and how's the fishing been your way?
Yeah, I think very similar to you, actually, Pete. We obviously we opened on the 15th of March on the Eden, which I didn't take a day off work and went down to the river. And actually, funnily enough, that was although I didn't catch anything, I managed to hook a couple, but lost them, which was annoying. But one of those on the dry as well. But that was actually probably one of the best days in March. We then had up here, we had a very cold easterly, which really sort of killed any. Although sometimes there's some really good hatches, the fish just never got going. And then we had that really hot spell, and I think that's just, it's just very unseasonal, and whether that's becoming a bit more of the norm, I'm not sure. But the fish didn't seem to like it very much, and yeah, bit of a tricky March. But I was out on Friday on the Eden, and although we had all four seasons really. We had sun, snow, hail. But as soon as the sun came out from the clouds, there was a little hatch and the fish just started rising. And I'm talking within seconds. It was amazing. So yeah, we've got the dry fly season undergoing, which was nice. And yeah, so quite similar to you, I think. I think a bit of a funny March, but it definitely feels like it's turned a corner a bit now. And I think they're a bit more switched on and on the feed, which is great.
Brilliant. And that's stark contrast to last year, really, isn't it? Because it was so cold for so long. And like you say, that sun, I noticed yesterday about when that fish rose actually was about, I think it was about 11:15, 11:30, something like that. And that sun came through, and that sun does have some heat in it already, actually, doesn't it? I really noticed that.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, I mean, I've just taken the dogs out for a quick run now, and yeah, when that sun comes out, it's really nice. The air's still quite cold, but I think it's changed to a slightly more westerly air, movement today, which hopefully will sort of bring the fish on a bit more as well. But yeah, that sun is definitely warmer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I always say on this podcast, Granham really for me is where it properly gets going, and they've sort of been trickling off, and I'll probably have a look possibly tomorrow. I may go and fish with my friend Perry actually, and we may go small stream fishing. We may go down further down the river. Haven't decided, but like you say, it's that nice moment, isn't it, when it feels as though, although being similar, that 15th of March is the kickoff for us. I've taken my time this year. This is probably, I think, one of the longest amounts of time it's taken me to actually properly go chasing some trout, and I seem to be a whole lot more patient about it, and I'll wait for the moments. And I was talking to my friend Andy actually on the phone just the other day, and he was saying exactly the same. Are you kind of like that, like you say, not taking the day off work? And do you find that you're sort of picking and choosing the moments more so, or do you just get so excited that you just have to go fishing?
I think certainly on open day, that's always a nice one to get out. I missed it last year. I was working away, but yeah, it's nice to get out on the open day. You know, I mean, we're early up here, the same as you, and I think really most places March is a bit of a hit and miss. It's pretty, you know, if you catch something, it's going to be a bit of a bonus. But yeah, I think it's just that it feels like you turned a corner. You know, the nymph rod's gone away now for the winter. And although still fishing, well, I was fishing the duo through most of March, really, and occasionally a bit on the dry if it was thought something was coming. But yeah, it's just nice to get out and to give it a go, even though quite often there's, you know, nothing really happens, or, you know, nothing's rising or whatever. You still think, oh, it's got, you know, there's a good chance here. But it's funny up here, we haven't really had any rain now, so the river's on its, you know, it's a proper summer levels, which is a bit odd. And yeah, again, it's just you know, it's another tricky aspect, but it's all part of the parcel, isn't it? It's all part of the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's similar here. And funnily enough, where I mainly fish, a lower river does fish better. So, you know, I guess I'm lucky that I've best of both worlds. If the river's bigger, I'll swing flies for salmon. And if not, then when it gets low, I'll go play with the trout a little bit more. So that's how I tend to do it. Tell me something. You said that you fish duo. How do you fish duo? Do you tie to the bend of the hook, or do you have a small dropper? How do you like to fish? Just interested to know. That was all.
So yes, I quite like the method. I mean, for me, dry fly is the preferred. But if they're not rising, you know, there's not a lot of point. You can sometimes get them to rise, but so the way I do is I tend to use I tie a clink hammer, either with a that sort of poly post, the fiber post, or sometimes I actually use a booby eye and trim that down and tie that in as a little float, really. And then what I do is I tie a tippet ring onto the just above the bend of it, or on the bend of the hook, and just thread it onto a bit of sort of you know, heavy sewing thread kind of thing, and then just tie that into the body, and then I'll tie my nymph onto that. Onto the bend works well, and I find tying it onto the bend or onto the tippet ring, you get less tangles when casting. Whereas when you've got a dropper on and you're trying to cast, you know, I think you're more susceptible to tangles then. But the only issue I sometimes have with tying on the bend of the hook, I just fish barbless flies, and very occasionally, that the tippet will just come off the point, and you lose your nymph and your length of tippet. So that's why I quite like that tippet ring. That's usually the way I fish a duo.
Cool. It's interesting. I was talking to Aitor on a podcast that's recently gone out, and we were talking about tippet rings and the use not necessarily just on the back, which is a very, very good idea, I have to say. But the use of those when because I try and get as long or out of a tapered leader as I possibly can, and I'll try and make one as long as I possibly can. And with the tippet ring, of course, you're not cutting up when you're joining a tippet onto your main leader.
Yeah.
You're not cutting into it, so it does. And I sort of drift in and out of using them, and there's no particular reason why not, to be honest. And I think part of it is if I do get hung up and I lose it, then trying to put a tippet ring back on is a bloody nightmare, and I usually drop them being as clumsy as I am. But they're a useful thing that I always promise myself at the start of seasons that I'm going to try and do things a little bit more and never do it and just go with the flow. But that may be something that I give a little bit more thought to. But as your business is called Eden Made, nets. I guess that the Eden is your home river. You've mentioned it as well. I've got I'm sort of kind of flirting with fishing the Eden again. The issue for me is that I've got such a good strike rate, and that I fished it for about 3 hours, and I caught a £2 trout and a dry fly, and then I caught an £8 fresh salmon about 10 minutes later. So I don't want to spoil that average.
No.
It's too good for me. But how would you describe the Eden to somebody listening? We get a lot of people who may not fish there, may not know it. They live overseas. How would you describe the Eden to somebody listening? And I guess it does mean a lot to you, given that your business is named after it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky with where I live, and I mean the Eden. I mean, the closest bit of the Eden is it's less than 2 miles. It's really close to me. And I'm in the Appleby Angling Club, which is it's not there's another club above us, Kirby Stephen, which goes right up. Their top water is a long way up. So we are Upper Eden really, but it's still it's still a proper river, and I think it's best to describe it. It's a very sort of typical freestone river. Um, the wading can be a bit tricky. There are some big rock bouldery sections. There's also some really nice bits of bedrock. We've got some sandstone sort of bedrock sections, which the fish seem to love because they have little channels sort of cut into the river, into the bed, which although sometimes it can be quite shallow, the fish will sit in those channels and then they'll just come up and they've got that bit of protection, but they're also quite easy access to insects. So they do love them, and it's a great river. I think it's probably fair to say it's one of the best rivers in England for sort of consistent large trout. Um, there's average is easily a pound and a half, and I think if you're quite easily or quite sort of um, there's a pretty good chance that that you could easily run into a 2-3 pounder on any given day. Really, there's plenty of fish to go at. So yeah, it's a nice river. It is really nice, and it's got a good variation throughout its length. As I say, where I am, we've got it's not too big that it's overwhelming. It's not like the Spey or something like that, where it seems like it's about half a mile wide in some places. It's not. There's some little technical sections, and it's just got a really good variation. I mean, I love it here, and it's a good place to be, actually, definitely.
And so, does that mean you've always been in the area? You've grown up here. That's your sort of home area, or did you migrate to that area? What is the backstory there?
Yeah, so as you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not a local. I guess I'm a bit of a mongrel in a way. Is that I actually grew up in your sort of neck of the woods down in Cornwall, and I lived down there for till I was about late teens, early 20s, and I came to college up in Cumbria, and I've just stayed on ever since. So I've been up here nearly 15 years, I think. Um, so I don't suppose I'll ever be considered a local, but there we go. But yeah, so I've just, as I say, just lived, and I've always lived in the Eden Valley as well. I lived just outside Penrith, and then I moved further down the Eden, which is actually north, just outside Armathwaite, which is stunning. I mean, if anyone's ever fished that, it's absolutely incredible there. It's like a different world. It's you've got these big sandstone cliffs, and yeah, it's an amazing bit of river down there. And now I moved up to just outside Appleby, which is slightly different again. But yeah, the Eden Valley is very special to me, and we've got it's a great area. We've got the Pennines really close, and the Tees up there. I fish the Tees as well, which is another great river. And then obviously we've got the Lake District, which is just a different kettle of fish again, and so much variety. It's a great, yeah, it's a really great place to live.
That's really nice to hear. And I've talked on here. Well, let's come round, actually. We're going to talk about the nets a little bit further down the line, but it was quite clear to me that, your passion came across there about the river and what it means to you. So was that an easy process to name your business after a river that meant so much to you?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's that I've got that. I've always had that connection. I think if ever you're talking about a river, always, I think everyone probably does it. Always in the back of your mind, you're comparing it to what is your home river in inverted commas, and I think probably almost all the time it never quite, um, it never quite it's at the same level. You've always got that. Your home river is the one you always think about, and that's the bar that you set. And I think that's the Eden with me. Um, so it was just, as I say, it was a natural progression, really. I mean, sort of 2 fields over from where I live, we've got a little stream called Troutbeck, which flows into the Eden. So it's all interlinked, and how and yeah, naming the business, definitely, I think that was a fairly easy decision to think about. Yeah.
Nice. And I like that analogy of your home water. And I think John Gierak mentions it as well in one of his books. And I sort of think of it that way as well. And my home river, the Tor, that you often say, oh, this is a bit like the Tor here, but a bit wider or a bit narrower, or it reminds me of a certain section of it, which is a really cool way to think about it. And to me, like you said, it shows how much your home river actually means to you. And I really like that when people are, and many people are, I know, hugely passionate about their home river. So I really like that. You mentioned the teas, and we've talked about the teas a number of times on here. I've been lucky enough to fish that 2 or 3 times. And that's a pretty cool river as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I like the teas a lot. It's a different thing altogether. You had James Wayne on a few weeks ago, and he and I fish together a lot. Pretty much all of our fishing we do together, and that's his home water, as it were. And so, well, I mean, we're both in the same clubs, just so we can fish different rivers together, sort of thing. And but yeah, the teas is great. It's got, again, so much variety. Um, Lower down, it's a big river, and it can be quite daunting. Especially, I mean, I find it a little bit daunting because it's, as I say, I'm on the sort of upper Eden, whereas when I go over there, we sometimes fish the sort of middle tees, which is a lot bigger. And it's. I think a lot of people, you kind of look at a bit of water like, I think, well, where the hell do I start? Um, but then we also fish the upper tees up at Middleton and above that and High Force, and it's stunning up there. I mean, it's just amazing. And yeah, it's such good fishing. I mean, when it's on, it takes it, because it's higher up. It does take quite a bit to get going. And I think we probably won't bother going there until sort of towards the end of April. But once it's on, it's just so much fun, and just such wild fish. It's a wild place to be, and they're just so full of energy, so full of life, and yeah, it's magical, really. It is a good spot.
Yeah, the high bit is you'd call up very upper river, I guess, but it's pretty wide there, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is a wide river, even right at the very top where it comes out of Cow Green. There is obviously there's a little bit of the head of the Tees above that, but yeah, it's still. I mean, it's bigger than the Eden up there even, and that's right up on the top of the Pennines. I forget the altitude, but it's pretty high. But it's all pocket water. It's great fun to fish. Yeah, you almost chuck your fly in anywhere, and there's probably a fish, but I mean they're 100 times faster than me most of the time. They're pretty testing little things, but great fun when you do get onto them.
Yeah, yeah. I fished also above Barnard Castle. I was obviously having an eye test when I was there. Um, and above there, what would that be termed, river around that sort of neck of the woods? Is that middle, upper, lower? I don't quite know.
I think Barnard Castle is probably right on the sort of the border between the two. I think you'd probably call it slightly more upper, but yeah, it's grayling water. I don't know that it's particularly. There's not much other coarse. I mean, I don't consider graylings to be coarse fish, but there's not. I think it's pretty much game fish there. So I'd call it probably the bottom of the upper tees, if you know what I mean. But yeah, it's a good section. Yeah, there's plenty to go at. I mean, it's a big river, as I say, it's long, and there's lots of water there.
Yeah, it's pretty deep in parts there as well, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. There's
Mm.
some fairly bottomless sections, which is, and the other sort of quite unique thing about the tees is you've got. I mean, if you've got 2 foot of visibility, it's crystal clear up there. It runs peaty all the time, and you can never see. If you're up to your knees, you can barely see your feet. So it's so difficult. It can be really hard to wade and quite treacherous because, like you say, you've no idea what's under your feet, and there can be some big old holes. Um, yeah, it can be a difficult river to wade for sure.
Yeah, but beautiful nonetheless. Absolutely love it. It does have a special place in my heart. Those certainly the upper sections there have mean a hell of a lot to me, and I've had some wonderful times there. And now we're in a world of where we can travel a little bit more easily. And I say this with some trepidation, but life in some respects is getting a little bit more back to normal. Does that mean you have got trips planned? Is there sort of places on the radar that you're hoping to fish this year and wet a line and perhaps cast a flyer to?
Yeah, no, definitely nothing set in stone. There's a potential trip to Poland with a couple of friends, but we'll obviously see how that goes. My sister's living in Norway at the moment and has done for a few years, and I'd love to get out and see her and do a bit of fishing out there. She's southern Norway, um, so that's another potential. And then further up in Scotland, I I mean, I'm only half an hour, 40 minutes from the actual border, and I fish the borders quite a bit. But I'd love to get further up into the Highlands and the Cairngorms and that sort of thing. And so yeah, I think if we can get a decent trip up there, that would be really cool. But yeah, just play it by ear a bit, and it's still a bit unsettled out there, isn't it? So we'll just see what happens. But
Nice. And you say on the border there, is that the Clyde that runs near the road there as you're sort of coming in Scotland, or you're just inside? Is it the Clyde? Or I'm not 100% sure, but it's always a river
um,
that I thought much about. I have to say, when I'm driving along there and you can see it, and it looks wild. There's almost a touch of Midwestern America there as well. Is that, what do you know about the river there?
I think that's probably border-esque that you're talking about. Um, the Clyde's a bit further up. The Clyde runs out in through Glasgow, um, and I forget exactly where it rises, but you've obviously got the Tweed, which comes out in the southern uplands, and runs obviously through Kelso and out that way out to the east. The Clyde, I believe, is just a bit further up again. So I think just in the border, you've got the border esque. There's the Annan, which is another good river.
Hmm.
Just a bit further west from the Annan is the Nith, which I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, the Neath or whatever. But yeah, there's some lovely rivers on the borders, and I mean they're quite similar to Cumbria because they're not that far away. But it's I think the nice thing about the borders is they're a bit wilder again. I mean we're lucky with the Eden Valley as it's not too touristy. Obviously the lakes can get really busy, with COVID, it did get really busy. But the borders tend to be a bit quieter, and I think the locals fish them quite hard. But yeah, there's plenty to go out. There's a lot of water up there, and yeah, there's some lovely fishing. Really good.
Nice. And are you tempted ever to go back to your old stomping ground in Cornwall?
Well, I went down there last year. My brother still lives down in Cornwall, so I go down to him. It's a long drive down, but it is nice. And I would definitely like to get down there this year and fish some of the Tamar. And I did have a day on Dartmoor last year, which I think I was a little bit early. I think there'd been a bit of a cold snap, and I managed a couple of fish in the end, but it was absolutely stunning water. It was the West Dart up just near below Two Bridges, and it was beautiful, really stunning, and it looked so fishy. And I couldn't get my head around why I wasn't catching anything. And I think they just weren't really on it. I think it had been cold, and I guess a bit like I was saying with the upper tees, it probably takes a little bit longer to get going. And I think I was maybe just a bit early in the season. So I'd love to have another go at that. And as I say, the upper Tamar would be. I'd like to have a go up there, and yeah, I definitely need to get back down and do it. Explore some of the rivers down there.
Nice. When were you on the West Dart? What time of year?
It would have been. I think it would have been early to mid-April.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be that, this year may be slightly different. I've not heard any real reports yet from that neck of the woods. But even, I remember guiding someone up there in May, and when you're guiding someone, you're not fishing, so you do get a lot colder. But I had the 3 or 4 fleeces on, jacket, thick woolly hat, and everything else, and then all of a sudden it turns. And funnily enough, where you talk about the West Dart below Two Bridges, the West Dart above Two Bridges kind of reminds me of the upper Tees, but about an eighth of the width. Pocket water, little, super fast rising fish. You're going to miss a load. And then sometimes they stick and everything else. But yeah, I'm like you, I think, by the sound of it, pocket water to me, and I know mutual friend James Wayne, who's written a piece in the current Fly Culture about pocket water, and there's something special about it, isn't there? And fishing it and seeing something come out of a little pot.
There is definitely. I mean, for me, it's partly that the scenery of where you typically get the pocket waters, like you say, Dartmoor, the Pennines on the Tees, that sort of thing. It's almost always stunning up there. In those sort of areas, and I guess as well, there's always that. I mean, I think probably most people will miss, I don't know, four or five times the fish that you actually catch. Yeah, they are so fast. It's unbelievable. I mean, if people haven't fished for that sort of fish before, very often they have no idea it's even been a fish. And you think, well, there was a fish there. Didn't you go for that? And I didn't even see it. You have to be so on the ball. But yeah, I think it's just that whole thing, isn't it? And that whole area, and I think the fish themselves as well. There's something about upland fish, especially in the peaty waters. You get that dark golden colour, and quite often they're almost black on top. And I think it just makes all the colours so much more vibrant. So you still have the red and the whites on the spots, but that just shines out so much more. And they are absolutely stunning fish, really are.
Yeah, and there's such a variety. I'm only using really Dartmoor as my example, having fished the upper Tees as well. But such variety, even from one pool to the next pool, the fish can be completely different, can't they? I don't know if that's the same on the Tees as well.
The next pool up, they're almost like char. Some of them, they're completely different fish. Yeah, they really are. They're lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the places as well, and on this podcast I always take talk about if you're fishing a dry flow overcoming drag, but certainly on Dartmoor they don't seem to mind it too much. And even as it drops off and cascades off, there'll often be a fish sitting at the back and letting it just the very last moment, and then a trout throws itself is deeply thrilling to me and part of the fun of it. But it's I'm just getting excited thinking about it now, I have to say, and I'm trying to tie something up to do some fishing up there as well soon. So looking forward to that. And that's the wonderful thing about this, isn't it? That there are, I look at, I don't know if you're the same, that every season it doesn't really have a pattern. And I just sort of like to go with the flow and enjoy, right, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to do that. I sort of have a list of things I'd like to do. Then all of a sudden, it just sort of takes its own path. Are you similar in that way, that you just sort of go with the flow, or you say, right, I'm going to fish here, or I'm going to do? How do you think about it from that point of view?
No, very much the same, really, Pete. We, obviously look at the weather, if it's wind direction, air direction, that sort of thing. And there's always a few rivers or spots that I've got on the radar that I'd like to revisit or go and have a look at for the first time. But otherwise, I guess if there's a bit of a trip away, or possibly the Upper Tees, something like that, which is day tickets and a little bit more of a drive sometimes. We'll think about plan that for the weekend or something if the weather's looking good. But otherwise, it's kind of, well, should we go here today? Let's try this beat, or let's give this one a go over here. And although you fish the same beats and the same sections of river, I think they're always changing. Even if they're sort of weather's staying the same and the levels are staying the same, there's still something always different. So you're always learning. You're always, the fish aren't always on the same lie or where you expect them to be, but they might be somewhere else. And I had a great day the other week down on a new section of the Eden that we've just got this year, and it's got a lovely big pool, deep pool, and we were just the fish weren't really playing ball, and we were stood up on the bank watching a couple of big graylings spawning, and then in the same pool a couple of big chubs. So it's just nice to see different spots and different. Even if it's not fishing, it's nice to take that time just to sort of see what else is going on. And so it's just really play it by ear, see what's looking good where, and just going for it, really, not thinking too hard. I think we're lucky where we are, where there's a lot of good fishing around and not always that far away. So we don't have to be too selective, and we can just sort of rock up somewhere and give it a go. And sometimes you'll catch, sometimes you won't. But it's always nice, especially nice to look to fish new water and explore new bits as well. Definitely.
Yeah, I've got one, and I've mentioned that a club I joined last year that I didn't get a chance to fish. Kev, if you're listening, we need to go and tick that off, because that's it's pocket water type place, certainly on the upper levels, and I want to go fish that. So Kev, if you're listening, I bumped into him at a show that he joined the same year as me, so we plan to go fishing together. So hopefully we can do that, and we can do some pocket water fishing elsewhere as well. But I wanted to move on because I'm really fascinated to learn about how your business, Eden Made Nets, came about. I want to sort of start that by saying I thought I'd mention that I've reached out to you, Roger, because I love to see small production artisans creating quality items. And I also enjoy social media pictures too. So I'm not getting free product or anything. I just want to spread the word. I really like what you're doing, and I like how you're doing it. And I love, like I say, somebody making a quality product that people are clearly enjoying. So I wanted to sort of understand a little bit more about how the business started and what the process is about. So first off, how did Eden Made Nets come about?
Yeah. So well, thanks for that. It's very appreciated. It was quite simple, really. I mean, done woodworking for years and in various capacities. And it started off that I made myself a net, and because I didn't have one, so I thought I'd make one, watch some videos on YouTube, and it was a fairly ugly thing. And I actually lost it on the river one day, and got back to the car. Bloody hell, where's my net? In fact, I think I might have even hooked a fish, then realised I hadn't got it. So couldn't obviously I went back down, couldn't find it. Thought nothing more of it, and then made another one, which was the sort of more or less exactly the same shape that I'm still using now. And I used that for a bit, and I was fishing with a friend of mine during the grayling actually, and he asked me, he said, "Oh, where did you get your net from?" And I said, "Well, I made it." And he said, "Oh, well, I'd really like to get one. I need a new one. I'd like to get, So I said, "Well, look, I'll make you one." We agreed on a price, and so I set to, had a go at that, and I had had all the materials and stuff, obviously, in the little workshop that I've got. So I made him a net, and I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I'll put a couple of pictures on Instagram and just put the question, just say, it's not even to sell, just to ask whether there would be any interest. And straight away from there, I probably had about 3 or 4 orders. Some of friends, and then a couple of people I'd never met just through Instagram, which is pretty cool. And that was really it. It kind of just grew from there. They had those few orders come through, and made them, put some more pictures out, more interest, that sort of thing. So then I set up the Eden Made Instagram page, which for quite a while was just the only real sort of form of advertising and selling. It's always amazed me that people would actually sort of bother to contact me, because it wasn't, I didn't have a website where you could just click and buy. It was bank transfer, that kind of thing. So it always amazed me that people could actually bother to do that. But it was quite nice in a way that they did, and I guess in some ways sort of makes you think that maybe it is worth doing. And and then grew from there. My friend Ian Winton, who does Wiley Leatherworks, he offered to help me get a website together, which he did most of the work. But so we got the website going, which was a big benefit, and sort of made things easier for people to look at them and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of it, and it's mostly just grown mostly through social media. I don't do any paid adverts. I've done a few things, such as this, where people have contacted me, or I've got in contact with people, and we've done a bit of a sort of chat about collaboration, that kind of thing. But really, it's just through pretty much just through social media, which is quite nice when it does work. It can be, I get a bit frustrated with it, but when it works, it is quite nice. Yeah,
That's an interest.
That's where I'm at the moment, really.
Nice. And that's a really interesting point about the social media point of it. And I know who's talking off mic, and, the growing things organically is, and we've done pretty similar with Fly Culture. We have done some sponsored ads, and, we've tried it just to see how it works and to let people know. And I'm sure you're aware as well that, there's lots of people who don't know about us, and, it's nice to see if you can find some of those people. But I guess if you're making a quality, nice product from not mass produced, hand built, handmade by yourself, it's a great way of showing your product to people, isn't it? And allowing them to see it. And all of a sudden you are reaching people, and we use the word organic growth again, but you're finding people, and they're finding you as well. And it's a great tool for doing that. Yes, those other issues aside, I think will change. And I've said that before, the way it's being used, I think will change. And the approach that you've had is is clearly working and has been a successful one and an enjoyable one, I guess, as well, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been really positive to see it grow, and to sort of see the effort paid off. And yeah, I mean, it's like I say, pretty much all of the advertising, or whatever you want to call it, is done through the website and social media, and Google, that kind of thing. We did actually do the BFFI in February, and that was great, actually, to meet people, and put some names to faces, and people who've chatted to on Instagram, and even people who have done nets for, and um, to sort of meet them, and have a chat with them. And then it was nice as a I think there's obviously an awful lot of people that aren't on Instagram or aren't on Facebook and that sort of thing. And it's we had one guy who he said, "Oh, well, where do you advertise?" I said, "Well, I don't. I just, as I say, I'm on socials." And he said, "Oh, well, I never would have seen you otherwise." And so that was quite nice to sort of engage with people that, as I say, otherwise would have no idea that you existed, sort of thing. Which it's still fairly new. It's only just over a year since it's kind of started, and um, hopefully still growing. And so yeah, I mean, it takes the time to get out there, to get the name out there. But I guess one of the nice things about fishing is it's fly fishing, especially, is it's a ridiculously small world, as I'm sure probably better than most. And it really doesn't take that long to get around the sort of circles, and there's not that many of them, and they're not that big, really, which is good in many ways. It's good, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it difficult turning something like you said that you made a few nets, and then as that grows, is that, I guess you're a year into that process, but are you wary of turning sort of a hobby into something a little bit different? Is that something that's in the back of your mind as well? Because it's always said, with people from, let's say, from a guiding point of view, turning a hobby into a paying pastime. Are you sort of aware of that, and are you managing that just to make sure you don't get jaded from building nets? The obvious thing I think about is production fly tying, and personally, I wouldn't be good enough to do it, but I could think of nothing worse personally. But I know people take great pleasure out of it. Are you sort of managing that aspect of it so that it doesn't become, oh God, I've got to build another bloody net sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the concerns. Is like I say, I've done woodworking for a long time, and I have done it professionally. I did some oak timber framing, and I worked in a sawmill and things like that. So to a slightly different degree. But I've often had people say, I mean, I've made things like small boxes and picture frames, and you know chopping boards, platters, that kind of thing for people, but always as a gift. And people have often said, oh, you should sell them or whatever. And I've usually always said, well, if I did that, I think I wouldn't enjoy doing them. And obviously the nets, it's not being forced on me, definitely not, and I don't consider it like that at all. But I had, like I was saying, quite quickly had basically had orders to fill or to fulfill, and and that's carried on, which is good. It has at times become slightly overwhelming, um, but I seem to have got through that, and it's it's at quite a nice level now where I haven't got a big backlog of orders. I can hopefully keep on top of them a little bit more, and that means I can get out and do a bit of fishing and other things, which is good, which I think is the important thing, is to have that balance. I mean, I don't do it full time, although at times there is a lot of time put into them. But I don't do it as a full time job. It's not my only job, which I guess is quite important as well, that I'm not dependent on it. Because I think if I were, that would certainly take it or put a lot more pressure, which would then probably take out quite a lot of the enjoyment. Although it is, it's quite it's a nice thing to have on going on the side, sort of thing. So yeah. To answer, I basically I do try and keep on top of it, that it doesn't become too much that I can't cope with it, or it's just takes over or whatever. I think that's really key to balance, to strike, really.
Nice. And a good answer as well. And I think with something like that, and I'll use the word artisan again because I think it's correct to where yourself is involved, that I think if you order something from somebody like yourself, you're expecting it to take a little bit of time. And I know, my friend Luke Bannister, when he builds a rod, I know it's not going to come next month. And part of that process is when it arrives, you're wow, and you've almost sort of so excited about seeing it that it's kind of cool when it does. And I think people are very accepting of a high quality product made by hand by that person that you've got contact with. So I think that's kind of cool. But I wanted to drill down into the process a little bit more and ask about wood and how you choose the wood and why, and how long does it take you to, because I guess you've got to shape it as well, and how long does it take you to build one of these nets?
I quite often get asked that question, and I usually say, well, I try not to time myself, which again I think is quite a good way of not getting sort of a bit snowed under with it. Realistically, it probably takes about 10 hours to do one net in total. But then I usually do it I usually try and have about 3 on the go at sort of different stages. So I'll have strips of. At the moment, I'm using oak and elm for the hoop, and two strips of oak or sometimes ash, and then a single strip of elm in the middle. So I have strips cut out for that, and then I glue them up onto the form, and then I'll have a sort of a stack of those glued up, ready to go. They need shaping and the slot cutting in them and all this sort of thing, and then I'll have handles either ready to go or just the boards, and then I'll cut the shape of them out on the bandsaw and shape them, and then everything's glued together, and then once it's glued together, then I can start actually shaping the contours and the the curves and all that sort of thing, which I do by hand. I use a spoke shave to get all those curves in, and then really, so I tend to have, as I say, about 3 of them on the go at a time. And after I've got the shape all roughed in, it's then just down to sanding, which is I start at usually 60 or 80 grit, which is pretty coarse, to refine all the shapes, the curves, and then I work my way up through the grits. And one of the reasons for having a few on the go at the same time is between every stage of sanding, I wet the wood just with water, and then let that dry. And what that does, it raises the grain, and it's really, I think, the only way of getting a really good finish. Especially if I didn't do that, I think as soon as someone used it, first time they put it in water, although it's the wood's been waxed, what would happen is the grain rises. It obviously takes on a bit of water, expands slightly, and it'll feel like sandpaper. It'll feel awful. So you have to, between each sanding, wet it, and before moving on to the next one. And then so I start at about at 60 or 80 grit, and I work my way up to 2000 grit, which is the final sanding. and then I'll laser engrave the logo and each net's number onto the bottom of the handle. And then I oil them with boiled linseed oil, probably about 2 or 3 coats of that to get that sort of penetrating into the wood. And then we actually make a beeswax and oil mixture, which gets sent out with every net as well, and that's the sort of the top coat, as it were. That's the finishing protection, to keep them looking good and to keep the wood sort of in good condition. Stop the actual wood drying out and it goes dull and it looks a bit ropey. So yeah, it's nice to. And what's nice as well is there's a few people who have got the nets that say that's now part of their sort of fishing or post-fishing sort of ritual almost, is to take the net out and to give it a wax and get it looking good again, which is nice that people actually take the time to keep on top of them and to keep them looking good, which is a nice thing to hear, really.
Absolutely, I like that. Did you, when it comes to the bag was that a difficult and long process to choose that? Because I was sort of kind of thinking actually when we were talking the style of bag, and I wanted one of those sort of silicone meshy type things, and I bought one when they first came out. Must have been 15 years ago, and the bags then were so heavy. And I bought one, even while you were talking, I was thinking about it. It was a company called Fisknat, Fisknat, and I bought it from a friend of mine who had a store in Colorado, because they were sort of kind of onto that. But while we've been talking, I've been thinking that probably sounds Scandinavian, actually, or unless it was somebody. But the bag was so heavy that I had a magnet to hold it in place, and I lost the net. It'd fallen off. The magnet wasn't strong enough to hold it. And I remember I was guiding someone, went to grab my net, and it was gone. But that's moved on a fair bit more. But coming back round to the question I originally asked, is it a silicone bag that you use? What is that? And was there a lot of process in that thought as well as part of the design?
Yeah, so I actually do 2 options. The sort of standard one is that silicone, that synthetic rubber, the clear one, which you're talking about, and I buy them from Snowby, which are down your way, I think, and they're imported, which is it is what it is. But I designed the net to fit that bag, because obviously, like you're saying, it is the shape it's in, or the shape, not so much the shape, but the circumference, really. So the hoop or the size of the net is designed around that, and there's not a lot I can do to change that, as it's difficult to. There's just not really a supply of them. I think Fish Pond do their own version, which I think is the same size. I have used 1 or 2 in the past, but there's not a big market of them, of actual things you can choose. There is another one which you quite often see on some of the sort of cheap import nets, which have actually got square holes and rectangular holes in the bottom, and they're quite big and they're absolutely useless. They're a bit shallower again, and it's what I used on the first net that I built. And if you get a small fish, which invariably you do, a sort of 4-inch par or whatever, quite often it would just fall through these holes in the bottom. And when it's still attached to your line, you tip it, you've got your bloody fly, your line running through your net, and this poor little fish dangling around underneath. It's absolutely a nightmare. So I don't use them. They have finer holes on these ones I get. So yeah, I do that clear silicone, which is the most popular one, which I think is great. It doesn't your hooks don't get all tangled up and snagged in it. It's quite easy to get out. They are better for the fish, I believe. There's definitely some research gone into that. But I think one of the other big benefits from, or a couple of the big benefits from them is one is they don't smell. So you don't smell, especially with grayling. I'm sure most people who fish with grayling, they smell of fish a lot more than trout do. So they don't hold that smell, which is nice. And the other thing is you can just give it a shake and it's dry again. So you've not got this great big dripping thing running down the back of your waders, which is a bit of a bonus. So that's, as I say, that's the sort of standard one we do. We also do another a black coated mesh, which is the coated nylon, which you typically find on the sort of McLean and that kind of style of net, and that's got a deeper bag, which some people prefer, and which is, I think, probably better for if you're bank fishing or rainbows, that kind of thing. It's quite handy to have that deeper mesh. But I buy them from Sharps of Aberdeen, but I do actually have to cut them down to fit my nets. So they have a seam that runs up one edge or one side, which I cut a sort of a triangular dart out, and I have to re-sew them on the sewing machine, which is okay. It's a bit of a faff, but to get them to fit the size of the net that I actually make. So they're the sort of two options we do. But I personally, I use the silicone one for 90% of the fishing I do easily, and I think it's fine. I mean, I've had about a 4 pound brownie in there, and it's been fine. It's no real bother. But as I say, the other option is there if people think they need it or feel they want it.
Nice. It's interesting what you said about those rectangular shapes in the mesh. I remember I had one, and I can't remember whose net it was. I genuinely can't. And I was doing a competition. It was for a magazine or something. I don't even know if it came out. I can't remember now. And it was to catch as many species in a day. And I was fishing with my friend Toby Merrigan, and we were caught all sorts of stuff. It was great fun. And then we thought, right, we need to get a grayling. And the river was big. It was really big. And I said, look, there's one spot. And I don't know how I did it without drowning, but I managed to catch a grayling. It was only about 4 or 5 inches. And I said, I've got one. And I was waiting for him. I can't remember if we had to have it. I can't remember the exact details of it. It was quite a few years ago now. And it got through the mesh, and we lost it, and it just wriggled through as I was bringing it through, and I was trying to keep it in the water as much as possible and everything else, and it got through, and I lost the fish, and we obviously couldn't count it. So I remember that. It shows how competitive I was, because I remember the team on the opposite side, I even showed them where they could catch a trout where we started the competition. So that shows how competitive I am about those things. But I also wanted to ask a little bit more. It's lovely that you're able to give your clients, I guess, a bespoke service. And I was looking on the website this morning, and length of handles and everything else. The other question I wanted to ask you was that you told me you recently built a CNC router. I have absolutely no idea what that is, but wondered if you could tell me what it is and what that does and how that helps in your building process as well.
Yeah, sure. So a router is basically a motor with a sort of a chuck on the end, which you can hold cutting bits. And the CNC, which is computer numerically controlled, is just it's a series of axes. It's 3 axes. So you have this motor held vertically, and then you have 3 axes which move independently, and you can draw a 3D model on the computer, put it through different processes, so different sort of cutting operations, and sort of tell it to go, spits out what's called a G code, which is thousands of lines of numbers, which is basically what tells the router where to move, and it goes away and does it most of the time. It's quite hit and, well, it's not hit and miss, but there's a lot of trial and error. and it's good fun to do. Actually, it's quite a nice thing to have. It's sort of something that's kind of been on the cards for a while, and I've been thinking about. Um, and yeah, so I built that this year, just sort of around Christmas time, um, and kind of with the idea to use it to do some of the shaping, the early stage of the shaping on the nets, which I haven't got around to really doing yet. Um, but since building it, I've started doing a range of fly boxes, which are on the website, and um, I've done a few of them now, which they're seeming quite popular, and they're nice. I glue them together. I glue together all the strips. So as you can kind of imagine, if you have a board of wood, the shape of the net handle is quite a wasteful shape. So I end up with quite a lot of scrap wood, which I save some of the bigger bits for bits and pieces in the workshop, and then quite a lot of it used to just go into kindling. But now what I do is I actually cut them down into strips and various widths, quite random. And I quite purposely cut them quite randomly, glue them together into a blank, into a block, and that's what I actually use to make the fly boxes. So it's quite nice that they not only look quite unique, I think, and yeah, pretty cool. They're quite interesting, but they're also they're using up what was just waste, which for me is quite important. I try and live a sort of fairly, everyone tries to do their bit, don't they? And I try and do my bit, and I think that's part of it. If I can utilize something that was previously just going to be waste, but actually turn it into something useful, then brilliant. So once I've got the blank of wood, I can put that on the CNC, and I have the file of the cutting operation. Send it to go, and it will go off and cut the shape of the fly box. Which I have made a couple of fly boxes in the past, more by hand, and I always thought it would be quite a nice thing to do and quite a nice product, but they're very labour intensive to do by hand, so I never pursued it. So now I've got this CNC doing it, doing sort of the hard work, not just the hard work, but the really intricate work, which would be difficult, very difficult to do by hand. It's quite a cool thing, cool way of doing it. There's still quite a bit of work with the sanding, especially on the dry fly box, which has got compartments, small little compartments carved in, and yeah, that's quite tricky to get in there with a little sander and get that finished up nicely. But it is possible and it's doable, and I think they work well. I think they've come out, nicely. They're pretty practical, and yeah, I'm enjoying mine. And again, it's kind of that for me, trying to get away from plastic quite so much, which is pretty difficult in the world we live in. But it's quite nice if you can do bits and pieces now and again. If one fell in the river and floated off and you're never seen again, there is no plastic in them. The hinges are brass. There's little magnets that keep the lid closed, and then the rest of it's wood, so it just rot away. So yeah, you might be annoyed that you've lost your fly box, but in terms of the environment, it's not the end of the world.
And I like you say, using up everything is a lovely story. And the fly box is available on the website as well.
They are, yeah. They went live a couple of weeks ago, so yeah, they're all up and running. And I've got plans to try and do a slightly bigger one for salmon flies, that kind of thing, or streamers. So hopefully there's that in the pipeline. I've got the program written. I just need to glue some bits up and do a few testers. So yeah, there's a few bits sort of in the pipeline. I think that's the nice thing about the CNC is it's another option. It's another sort of string to the bow, and One of the other sort of things I've got floating around in my head is to do some fly tying caddies, I suppose you'd call them, for better use of the word. Somewhere little tool storages or um, bobbin spool storages, that sort of thing. And so I've got a few of them, which again I need to get on and get a few prototypes and see how they work. But I think they could be quite nice. I mean, I'm sure most people, my fly tying desk is a mess. There's stuff scattered everywhere, and you're forever rummaging around trying to find what you need. So quite nice to have things a little bit better organised. So yeah.
Nice. And I saw on social media this morning that somebody landed a great big Tay Springer using one of your salmon nets. I guess that process of building a bigger net is a little bit more testing and challenging, is it?
It is, yeah. So it's one of the sort of hardest and most time-consuming bits is actually getting the form for bending the strips of wood for the hoop, which, like I was saying earlier, that's designed to fit the mesh rather than the other way round. So it's quite an awkward thing to work out because obviously the mesh is relatively round, although it's flexible. It's essentially a circle, whereas obviously the hoop isn't. So it's quite a lot of sort of trial and error and screwing bits of wood down and seeing how they look and seeing how they fit, to get that shape to actually fit the mesh. Um, the handles are actually relatively easy because I use the shape of the hoop to then scribe the line for the flare at the top of the handle where it joins. So I use the hoop to give me those lines, and then the rest of it, the actual handing that bit you hold is is fairly straightforward, and so there is quite a bit. I mean, I enjoy it. I like doing the custom ones, and it makes you think, and it um it definitely takes some of the. It's nice to do a different thing. It's nice to think about it and not sort of just do the same one over and over again. It's not, it takes you out of that sort of production line mode a bit, which is good. So yeah, Charlie, my friend Charlie, he had that lovely Tay Springer yesterday, which he was chuffed to bits with. I made him that net earlier this year, that was his christening of it, which is I love seeing. That's one of the things I really love seeing is when people send me pictures of they've christened a net. Sometimes it can take a few weeks or whatever, but it's great to see someone actually using it for what it's designed for. And I've done a few which have gone international and that sort of thing. So it's really cool seeing them in Germany in Black Mountains or whatever, or some out in America, and it's pretty amazing to think that something I've made is getting used, halfway across the world, really.
Yeah, it's lovely. I know I'm sure you're the same, that when the new magazine comes out, we never ever ask anyone to tag us or put the, images out. And it's really, I get a sort of a sleepless night that before the magazine starts hitting with people that, oh, I hope they've liked it. I hope they liked it. And then you see those images of people sharing the cover and everything else is a really cool thing. And then yours is even a step further, isn't it? That you're seeing beautiful images of beautiful fish in those beautiful nets. It's almost humbling, isn't it, to see that? And like you say, seeing something that you put your heart and soul into that people are enjoying and it's turned out for them exactly what they wanted it to be. It's pretty special, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm just exactly the same. Yeah, it's brilliant to see them being used, and I quite often get people say, and we got it a bit at the BFFI. People say, "Oh, they're too good to use," and sort of thing. And I think, well, I often said, well, they're not. They are designed to be used, and they're actually really durable. I mean, I've been using one which is couple of years old now, and it's still absolutely fine. And the nice thing about them, I mean, one of the things I get asked sometimes is about the finish and how to keep them looking good. The thing about the reason I chose the wax is for the reason that you can top it up essentially. It Whereas with varnish, I don't really like varnish because it feels quite plasticky. But also, if you chip it or you rub a bit off or whatever, it's almost impossible to patch it up. So you basically have to strip it all back and redo it again from scratch, as it were. Whereas the nice thing about the wax is you can literally just put a bit more on, and you can even just put a bit more on in a certain area that needs it. I mean, usually the bottom of the hand always gets a bit of a battering, but a light sanding and put some more wax on, and it's it's basically as good as new. And I mean, for me, I'm not super. Obviously, I'm slightly different that I make them, so I don't need to be super precious about it. But I I think that use, they get better with age. They get that a few battle scars and a few memories sort of knocked into the wood, and I think that's all part of it. I mean, that's one of the nice things about wood, that you get a patina over the years, and it just looks, if you keep looking after it, it'll just keep looking better and better, I think.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't think you get that with plastic somehow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it reminded me of a comment, and, as listeners know, I like to fish bamboo rods as well. And I have some, and I was thinking of the bamboo South Creek rod maker, Mike Clark, saying that, they put their heart and soul into these rods, not to be stored in a cupboard, go fish with them. And that always rings in my ears. So I fish with them. I'm very fortunate that I have one of his rods, and I fish with it and I enjoy it. And like you say, those little nicks, those scratches, I'm just going to enjoy it. It's my rod. I'm going to fish with it. I've not bought it as an investment. I bought it to fish with, or it was bought for me for my 40th by my wife. But I will continue to use it and enjoy them. And it resonated with me exactly what you said about that. You put in your heart and soul not to be stored in a cupboard. And those little knocks are battle scars. They could be when you were landing an epic fish. It could be whatever it might be, but there's a story attached to that. And that's part of that net's history, isn't it? And that's why it's important that you've got to use these things, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I had a cane rod. A friend of mine built one last year for me, or I commissioned one. And when I first received it, I was terrified of using it. And well, what if you break it? What if I, scratch it or whatever? But then, I guess some of the newness has worn off it a little bit. But now it's just such a nice thing to use, and they just get better with age, don't they? And I think the more you use it, the more you get used to it, the more it just feels better to you. And I think I hope it's the same thing with the nets. They become a lot more personal, I think, because of the wood and the way it feels. And quite often people will ask me if they can choose the wood, or I can send them pictures of the wood that I'm using, and they can pick a board or a piece on the board, or whatever, and I love doing that. And then I know that person's had an input. And actually, some of the ones that I've enjoyed the most is when people have actually asked me to make them a net or a couple of nets out of wood that they've provided. So I've had some where they've had a tree felled in their garden or whatever, for whatever reason, and they've said, can you make some nets out of them, which is brilliant. It's got a story for them, but it's also got a story for me. There's my input for it, but then that's always their net, and they've got that story of, well, this wood actually came from a tree in my garden, and and this chap built it for me. And I think that's lovely. I think that's really good, and it's just a special thing to have. And Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not cheap, are they? But I think I think you've got to. I hope that people sort of appreciate them a little bit more, maybe because they're not. We live in quite a disposable world, really. Well, not that's like the wrong thing to say, but everything's single use nowadays, isn't it? So it's nice to have something that's not like there's the resurgence of cane, and which is brilliant because it's not a disposable tool anymore. It's actually something you keep and you want to try and pass on, and I think that's important to bring a bit more of that back into the world and to sort of try and move away a little bit from Amazon Prime next day delivery, and it's it's tricky, isn't it? But it's nice to have a bit of a balance sometimes as well.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. And yeah, I think the cost of some things have got so expensive that people are looking to source products that, like you say, are built by people like yourself. There is a provenance to them. There is the heart and soul gone into them, that aspect of it that I think people are looking more for these days, and long may that continue as well. But I think that's a lovely way to tie things up now. We've been talking over an hour and a quarter, and we've only really touched the side, I guess, in some respects. But it's given me a really good, clear understanding of you as a person, of what the product means to you, what fishing means to you, all of those sorts of things, which has been really wonderful to listen to. If people want to find you on social media, your website, anything else, how do they find you, Roger?
Yeah, so the social media is Eden Made 2021. Both on Instagram and Facebook. I tend to do more on Instagram, but I am on Facebook as well. And then the website is just www.edenmade.co.uk. So yeah, pretty simple to find, and yeah, it'd be great to hear from some people. And
that would be fantastic. And I hope if you're listening, if you've enjoyed listening to Roger as much as I have been talking to him, that you'll go across, perhaps give them a follow and see the imagery on there is really, really cool as well. And I really, really like it. So, Roger Taylor, it's been brilliant talking with you this morning. I've really, really enjoyed talking about fishing, home waters, but also learning about what goes into building one of your nets. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me this morning.
no, not at all, Pete. Thanks very much for having me on. And yeah, really good, really nice to chat to you, and very like-minded, definitely. No, that's brilliant.
Your beard's much better than my old one, and I'm sort of seeing. I can see Roger here. He's got Patagonia cap on. He's got great big beard, and they're the sort of people I gravitate towards. So it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast.
Cheers, Pete. Thank you very much.
Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. As ever, there will always be plenty more down the line, so make sure you tune in. If you are enjoying them, please consider subscribing. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.